Good morning. Welcome to Kenya News Update today. I'm your host, and we're diving deep into a major urban development story that could reshape the capital city. President William Ruto has unveiled what he calls a transformative plan for Nairobi's waste management system. But as with any ambitious government initiative, it raises critical questions about feasibility, funding, and the real priorities of a nation facing multiple crises. Over the next 12 minutes, we'll unpack the details, examine the challenges, and debate whether this is the right focus for Kenya at this moment. We'll also connect it to broader national issues, including the plight of Kenyan workers abroad and the enduring legacies of historical injustice. This is a story about waste, but it's really a story about Kenya's future. Let's start with the announcement itself. Speaking at PEFA, All Nations Church in Gikamba on Sunday, February 1st, President Ruto framed this as a cornerstone of his national development agenda. He declared, and I quote, "There is no way we can transform Kenya without transforming Nairobi. That is why we have a comprehensive plan to deal with the waste management crisis in our capital." The president emphasized that a clean, efficient Nairobi is essential for Kenya's transition from what he termed a third-world economy to a first-world nation. The vision is clear: modernize the city's infrastructure, improve public health, and create a more attractive environment for investment. The plan, as outlined, involves a significant public-private partnership model, aiming to overhaul collection, sorting, recycling, and final disposal. The goal is to move away from the notorious Dan-Dor-A dump site towards a more sustainable, technology-driven system. On paper, it's exactly the kind of progressive urban policy many have called for. But the devil, as always, is in the details and the dollars. To understand the scale of the challenge, we need to look at the current state of affairs. Nairobi generates an estimated 2,400 tons of solid waste every single day. That's a staggering figure. Yet, the city's formal collection system manages to handle only about half of that volume. The rest ends up in illegal dumps, clogging drainage systems, or being burned in open pits, contributing to severe air and water pollution. The existing infrastructure is outdated and overwhelmed. The Dan-Dor-A dump site, which has been operational for over 4 decades, is a public health disaster, leaching toxins into the soil and air, affecting the lives of hundreds of thousands who live in its vicinity. For years, promises to close it have come and gone. So, President Ruto's plan is not just an upgrade, it's an attempt to solve a decades-old crisis. The proposed solution involves constructing new waste-to-energy plants, modern material recovery facilities, and a fleet of new collection trucks. The estimated initial investment required is in the range of 30 to 40 billion Kenyan shillings. That's a massive financial commitment. The government says it will attract private investors with guaranteed returns, but critics are already questioning the math and the risk to public funds. This brings us to our first major point of debate: priority. Is overhauling Nairobi's waste management the most urgent use of national resources right now? Let's consider some competing needs. Kenya's public debt stands at over 10 trillion shillings. The cost of living remains painfully high for millions, with inflation for basic food items still hovering around 10%. The healthcare system is under immense strain. And then there are the urgent human crises unfolding beyond our borders. Just this week, harrowing new testimonies emerged from Kenyan women trapped in what can only be described as modern-day slavery in Saudi Arabia. Reports detail hunger strikes, blocked toilets, racial abuse, and severe medical neglect. These women, who went abroad seeking opportunity, now find themselves in illegal detention or abusive employers' homes, their families back in Kenya pleading for help. By the time the aircraft wheels touched the tarmac last year at Jomo Kenyatta International Airport on Christmas Day, the Kenyan women stepping off that flight were broken, traumatized survivors. Their ordeal highlights a massive failure in our labor export protections and diplomatic consular services. So we must ask, should billions be directed first towards rescuing and protecting our citizens abroad, or towards cleaning up Nairobi? It's a brutal but necessary question about the hierarchy of a government's responsibilities. Proponents of the waste plan argue that you cannot separate economic development from environmental health. A cleaner Nairobi, they say, will reduce disease burdens, increase productivity, and boost tourism and business confidence. They point to successful models in cities like Kigali, Rwanda, which is renowned for its cleanliness. They argue that solving this long-standing urban problem is a direct investment in the well-being of Nairobians and a demonstration of good governance. Furthermore, the plan promises to create thousands of green jobs in recycling, logistics, and engineering. This is a powerful argument, especially for the youth. The government's position is that you can walk and chew gum at the same time, that addressing domestic infrastructure does not mean abandoning citizens abroad. They would point to recent diplomatic efforts to renegotiate labor agreements with Gulf states. But the counterargument is about scale and immediacy. The suffering of those women in Saudi prisons is happening right now. It requires urgent diplomatic pressure and resources for repatriation and legal aid. Can the government effectively marshal resources for both a massive capital project and a complex international humanitarian crisis simultaneously? Or will one inevitably suffer at the expense of the other? Let's delve deeper into the financial mechanics of the waste plan. The 30 to 40 billion shilling price tag is just the start. Operating costs for high-tech waste facilities are enormous. The proposed public-private partnership, or PPP, model means a private company would build and operate the system, and the Nairobi County government would pay them a fee for the service. This fee would ultimately come from taxpayers and from new waste collection charges levied on households and businesses. Critics fear this will lead to a significant increase in the cost of living for Nairobians, who are already struggling. They also warn of contractual capture, where the government becomes locked into long-term, expensive contracts with private operators, limiting future flexibility. We've seen this play out in other sectors. There's also the question of whether the promised private investment will materialize. Global economic conditions are tight, and investors are cautious. If the private sector doesn't step up, will the national government divert funds from other critical budgets to fill the gap? This is the core of the fiscal risk debate. Now, let's shift perspective entirely and consider a different kind of legacy, one that connects our modern dilemmas to much older patterns of exploitation and silence. While we debate waste and labor, a powerful historical narrative is resurfacing, reminding us that global inequities have deep roots. In 1786, a free black man named Kwabena Adaba Kugono, living in London, sent a direct appeal to the Prince of Wales. Kugono, a former slave who became a leading abolitionist, pleaded with the monarchy to use its power to end the transatlantic slave trade. His parcel to Carlton House contained his powerful writings, a moral argument against the inhumanity of slavery. The response from the royal family was silence. This historical moment, detailed in new research, shows how systems of power have long ignored the pleas of the oppressed when economic interests were at stake. The Crown's silence then mirrors a certain silence today. Are we, as a global community, listening to the pleas of the Kenyan women in Saudi prisons? Are we listening to the communities living next to Dan Dora? Or are their cries being drowned out by the noise of economic deals and development rhetoric? This historical parallel isn't about drawing a direct equivalence, but about recognizing a pattern, the tendency of powerful institutions to prioritize economic and political convenience over fundamental human justice. Returning to Nairobi's plan, another critical layer is the social and informal economy. Currently, waste management in Nairobi relies heavily on an informal network of waste pickers, mostly from very poor backgrounds, who scavenge through dump sites like Dandora to recover plastics, metals, and other recyclables. This informal sector is estimated to involve over 6,000 individuals in Nairobi alone, and they recover upwards of 20% of the city's recyclable waste. Their work is dangerous and exploitative, but it provides a crucial livelihood. The question is, what happens to them in a modernized, corporatized system? Will they be integrated as formal employees with fair wages and safety gear, or will they be displaced and marginalized by machines and private companies? A truly transformative plan must have a just transition for these workers at its heart. If it doesn't, it risks solving an environmental problem by exacerbating a social one. This is a key test for the government's commitment to inclusive growth. So, where does this leave us? We have an ambitious plan with noble goals, a cleaner, healthier, more modern Nairobi. We have a president staking political capital on its success, framing it as essential for national pride and economic ascent. But we also have daunting financial questions, urgent competing crises involving the welfare of citizens abroad, and the need to ensure social equity. The debate isn't about whether Nairobi needs better waste management, it desperately does. The debate is about the sequence, the cost, the implementation, and the broader context of national priorities. Can Kenya afford this now? More importantly, can it afford not to do it? The pollution from poor waste management has a daily, tangible cost in healthcare spending and lost productivity. It's a slow-burning crisis. The crisis in Saudi Arabia is an acute human rights emergency. Balancing these requires not just money, but exceptional political will and administrative competence. As we conclude, let's remember that transformation is more than just infrastructure. It's about values. It's about whether a government listens to the most vulnerable, both at home and abroad. It's about building systems that are not only efficient but also just. President Ruto's waste management plan will be a litmus test for his entire administration's approach to development. Will it be a top-down, contract-heavy project that benefits a few? Or will it be a participatory, inclusive process that lifts up the informal sector, protects public finances, and delivers real, measurable improvements in the lives of ordinary Nairobians? The coming months, as tenders are issued and contracts signed, will give us the first real clues. The silence or the voices surrounding the plight of Kenyan workers in the Gulf will give us another. And the ghost of Ottawa reminds us that history judges nations not by their grand plans, but by their actions towards the least powerful. The challenge for Kenya is to build a future that learns from the silenced pleas of the past. Thank you for joining this deep dive. We'll continue to follow this story closely. For now, this is Kenya News Update Today. Subscribe to Kenya News Update Today for more in-depth analysis.